innocence had never appealed to James. He was a man who had lived his life by society's rules, which was to say he was a gentleman in the public eye always. So he had never ventured into a lady's private domain, even when he'd known he'd be welcomed. Instead, he had sought companionship outside his social circles, and while he liked to think that the women in question had had no complaints, he certainly had not either. Because those women he had been with had been experienced and discreet. They knew what they wanted and were not afraid to demand it from him. And James had enjoyed his time with each of them. But Lady Diana Hughes, with her shy smile and sweet disposition, was erotic in an entirely unprecedented way. James felt responsible for her pleasure, and that did not scare him. If anything, it made him want to give her the fairy tale that any young girl might imagine for herself. He wanted to make her realize how much power she wielded so that one day she could take what she wanted from him as his wife. And because she wanted her last night of freedom, he would give her that too. He would give her a taste of the rebellion she so desperately needed, and tomorrow, he would face the consequences of his deceit. "How did you imagine this your first kiss?" he asked. "When you dreamed of it as a girl, how did you imagine it?" She shook her head, denying him the knowledge he wanted. "You'll find it silly." "No, I won't." "Do you think that men don't dream of what it is to find someone who makes their hands shake with need?" When she did not reply, only looked at him with huge eyes, he raised her hand to his face and placed her open palm against his masked cheek. Just because we men are not afforded the opportunity to be romantic does not mean that we lack it entirely. He turned his face and pressed a kiss to her palm. She sighed, but she did not remove her hand. Instead, she brushed her knuckles over the ridge where his mask ended and his skin began. The touch was like nothing James had ever experienced. It was gentle and affectionate, with no seductive knowledge or intent. So why, he wondered, did it spread fire through him? "Well, I suppose I never really thought of it specifically, but I always imagined being held closely." James tried to stifle his groan, but it escaped from his throat in a low sound of pleasure. "May I?" he asked, and when she nodded, instead of wrapping her in his arms, he leaned down and lifted her off her feet. She gasped and reached out one hand to steady herself on his chest. James felt her gentle touch, as he might a branding iron, searing, painful, permanent. He carried her to the bench and sat down. He gently settled her weight on his thighs and then, shrugging out of his evening jacket, draped it over her shoulders. "How am I doing?" he asked. She dropped her head against his chest, replied, "Rather too well, I think." "Too well. I keep thinking about him," she said, "and I hate that he can steal even this from me, and all before I've met him. And even though I am angry, I feel guilty for this." She tapped his chest. "I feel guilty for being happy right now, for taking something I want, because I'm promised to someone else." "I think your Earl would understand," James replied cautiously. "I don't think he would. According to my mother, the Earl of Heather is known for being quite perfect." James couldn't help the laugh that rumbled from his chest. If only she knew how far that was from the truth. Leaning forward, he brought his lips to her ear and whispered, "Nobody is perfect. He is as close as one comes, and even though I don't know him, I find that I am terrified of disappointing him." You won't. Leaning closer, he inhaled her perfume, filling his lungs with her scent. You can't possibly know that. I assure you I do. How? She asked. Tell me how you can possibly know that. Why don't I show you instead? James asked, and when she nodded, he touched his lips to hers. Finally, the kiss was light, almost proper, just the softest touch of his lips to hers. But Diana felt it resonate through her entire body, and when he pulled back and said, "How could you ever disappoint a man when your taste was made to drug him?" She sighed. He ran his lips down her neck and whispered, "How could you ever disappoint a man when your skin is the softest thing he's ever touched?" His big hand settled over her dress to grip her thigh. How could you ever disappoint a man when your body is all he will ever think about afterwards? She shifted on his lap, trying to dispel some of the tension collecting within her. But the stranger made a pained sound and, gripping her hips on either side, held her in place. "Did I hurt you?" she inquired. His deep chuckle seemed more amused than pained. "No, I am—" He sighed deeply and fell silent. Aroused, she guessed. His laugh stuttered out of him. "I was trying not to scare you. I assure you, my lord, that just because I came out here for a kiss does not mean that I am wholly ignorant of the other proceedings between a man and a woman." With her fiancé almost completely forgotten in the erotic moment, she added, "You fit inside of me." Realizing what she'd said, she flushed with mortification and hurried to correct herself. "Or rather, he does. My intended. Oh, God, what am I doing?" Terrified by how quickly the moment had gotten away from her, she started to climb off his lap. If she did not leave right then, she knew she would fall victim to her own lust. Because the handsome stranger was holding her and whispering the sweetest words to her, while somehow still being the type of gentleman she'd always imagined for herself. And all she could think was, why couldn't it have been him? I must go. I'm sorry. This is too much. When her eyes began to burn with tears of fear and frustration and impending loss, she bravely held them back. "Diana!" She was in such a frenzy that she didn't realize that he'd used her name until he said it a second time, one firm, "Diana." But when she heard it, she took one big step back away from him. "You know who I am." And then the panic came. "Oh my God." She stepped back again. "Oh no." She shook her head, trying to deny it. "If we had met before tonight, I would have recognized you." "You don't know me yet." "How?" she asked, her voice trembling. "If that is true, then how is it that you know who I am?" He did not move from his seat on the bench, only looked at her from behind his mask, like some seductive predator with twisted intentions. "I won't touch you. Please," he said quietly. "Come back here. Let me explain. You have nothing to fear." She didn't listen to him. She spun around, then right back again. "You must promise you won't say anything." In her panic, her overactive mind turned to the worst-case scenario. She imagined him this enticing creature of the night, lazing in his club, laughing over her naivety with his friends. "I will be ruined. Oh, God, my mother told me this would happen. I would never betray your trust." "How am I supposed to believe you?" she whisper-shouted. "Practically or truthfully?" "Both." "Practically because your ruination would reflect rather badly on me. Truthfully, because you are suddenly the person I want to protect most from the world." Diana ignored how his second point made her heart ache. "You are married," she guessed.
Not yet.
So how would my ruination reflect badly on you? She demanded. In my experience of the world, men are rarely shunned for such things, while a woman ruined must carry the burden for both of them. He was quiet for a long moment, but when he moved, he still did not stand. He raised his hands to the back of his head and untied his mask. Using one hand, he peeled it from his face and then slowly raised his eyes to hers. Diana's breath caught. She'd known he was handsome, of course, but with the mask, he could have been imperfect. Without it, he was like some fallen angel. Perfect, sinfully so. She was half tempted to ask him to put it back on. I still don't know you, she said quietly. I know. He stood, but he did not approach, only bowed low and said, James Blake, the Earl of Heather. When he raised his eyes back to hers, he added, It is an honor and a pleasure to meet you, Lady Diana. It had gone too far. He had gone too far. James could only forgive himself for it, because he didn't think that any flesh and blood mortal could stand against such a tender-hearted creature. What type of woman felt guilty for betraying a man she had not met and did not love? Instead of giving her the thrilling night she'd wanted, James had scared her. He'd made her cry, and he couldn't stand her tears. He told himself that that was why he'd revealed himself to her, and it was. But the other truth was that he didn't want to touch her as someone else. He wanted to touch her as her fiancé, as a man of her choosing, as a man she wanted touching her. Diana stood before him, her chest heaving, her gray eyes storming, and he had never wanted her more. Was your intention to embarrass me? No, he insisted vehemently. To test me then, she countered. His moment of silence was deafening. And I have failed. She clenched her fists and closed her eyes. I am ruined. You are perfect. Her eyes snapped open and fastened on his face. Do not do that. Do not play any more games with me. I am not. What do you want from me? She asked. Now that you have satisfied your curiosity, what do you want from me? A lifetime. Because you have proven my innocence, she demanded hotly. As if the reminder humiliated her anew, she buried her face in her hands. Oh, God. James couldn't stand it anymore. He had kept his distance as to not intimidate her, but her anxiety, her humiliation, her fear, he would not accept. He closed the distance between them, and when she dropped her hands to take a hurried step back, he stopped. He held out one hand for hers and said, Trust me. She eyed his hand warily. Let me explain. She hesitated, and she didn't take his hand. She stepped past him, giving him a wide berth, and walked to the bench, her mistrust glaring. The loss of her closeness was physically painful. This time, he did not settle her on his lap, even though he wanted nothing more. He picked up his discarded jacket from the floor and placed it on the bench for her to sit on before taking a seat beside her. When I saw you tonight, it occurred to me that a masquerade ball would be the perfect time to get to know you without the pressure of our nuptials looming over us. So you tricked me. I assure you, if I tricked anyone, it was myself. I thought I could hide behind my mask and get to know the real you, all your flaws and vices, and instead I discovered that you have very few, and it is I with all the flaws and the vices. Diana frowned. Very few, she queried. What vices do I have? My lady, by your own admission, you snore. rather loudly, too. Will not laugh. Diana swore to herself, but her twitching lips somewhat undermined her promise. You are trying to use humor to eradicate my anger. Is it working? He asked hopefully. Yes, she begrudgingly conceded. And more than the fact that he had revealed himself to her before things had gone too far, Diana was admittedly quite relieved. It was an entirely different thing, she realized, to be ruined by one's fiancé than by a random stranger she'd picked out of a ballroom. That was if he still intended on marrying her. Terrified anew by the thought, she asked, "Are you still going to marry me?" "As soon as humanely possible." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment as he thought through his reply. "While I admit that I chose you for your family name and reputation, I want to marry you because you are kind and funny, and though I am not so very shallow, anyone can see that you are beautiful. I have spent an hour in your company, and instead of being bored or frustrated, as I usually am, when faced with having to make small talk with an eligible woman, I am desperate for us to be married so that I can have more of you. I am greedy for you, Diana, in a way that I have never been for anything else before." That heaviness was back coiling within her like some overwound jack-in-the-box waiting to explode out of her. "Would you like to forget this ever happened and meet me officially tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. "No, I would like to kiss you again, properly this time, as your fiancé." Diana hated that she was so easily wooed, even though she could begrudgingly admit that most women would be. Instead of being angry, she was relieved. The weight she had carried since she'd found out she was to be married to a stranger eased. James did not seem cruel or crass or cold. He seemed kind, if a bit uncertain. And oddly, despite his deception, she believed him. She could hear the sincerity in his tone and see it in his blue eyes. And selfishly, she wanted to be kissed again, too properly this time. Summoning every bit of courage she had left, she nodded. He made that sound in the back of his throat. Without a word, he reached over and lifted her back onto his lap. This time, his arms pulled her closer higher, so that she could feel the hard ridge of his arousal beneath his trousers. She exhaled an anxious breath and turned to face him. "Should I take off my mask?" she whispered. "No, leave it on. I don't need to see your face to know you're what I want. And on the off chance that someone stumbles upon us, you'll be more protected behind your disguise." The notion that they might be caught felt different now, as terrifying as it was exciting. "What would you do if we were caught?" she asked. "Elope tomorrow," he replied instantly, and when she laughed, he added, "Actually, let me go see if I can bribe someone to walk this way." "You don't have to trap me. Our engagement has been decided." "But you did not have a say," he added quietly. Diana remembered everything that she had told him. She flushed with mortification. And yet she felt that renewed honesty on both sides was an important first step for them. "It is terrifying," she admitted, "to be given away to someone I had never met before." "Will you forgive me?" he asked. "I have no excuse except to say that I have learned to be practical, maybe even cold out of necessity. Sometimes I operate my life like I do my business, but you are right. You are a person with hopes and fears and dreams, and I should never have asked for your hand without affording you the opportunity to know me first." Diana felt herself softening even more. She had a sense that the Earl of Heather was the type of man who took his role as protector of his family very seriously, perhaps even too seriously. After all, he was prepared to marry a woman he did not know, based only on her breeding and reputation. Over the course of their marriage, she would have to show him that she was capable of helping him carry that burden. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "Thank you." He raised his hand to her face and tipped her chin back. "May I kiss you again?" "Yes." He guided her lips to his. Diana sighed, but when James slipped his tongue into her mouth, she stilled. He pulled away, but only to murmur, "Let me show you, little dove." Warmth spread through her in a lovely slow flow. She nodded shyly, and he kissed her again this time, taking her deep. His tongue brushed hers, encouraging her to do the same, and the moment she returned the kiss, he groaned. The sound shot sensation through her womb. Her breasts ached beneath her stays. His hands settled on her hips, gripping the fabric there tightly, as if he wanted to use his hands on her, but was physically holding himself back. Diana's body was tightly strung. She had never felt this deluge before. Her own need was shocking, carnal, primitive, and when he broke the kiss, she whimpered at the loss, and she begged more. A single word undid James. He had never felt this fevered mix of emotions before. Her slight weight was the most erotic pressure he'd ever experienced, even as her shy kisses reminded him of her inexperience and humbled him further. He was already on the edge of his self-control, and yet equally desperate to prolong the moment for Diana, who deserved all the tenderness and care he could muster within himself. He took her lips again this time, in a long, gentle kiss that spun on and on. He kept his hands firmly fixed in the fabric of her skirts to stop himself from touching her. But when she pulled back and moaned in frustration, he asked, "What's wrong? Tell me what you want, what you need." "I don't know," she replied, her tone laced with frustration. She collapsed against him. "I don't know," she repeated. "Do you trust me?" Unlike the times before this time, it was a question, not a demand. To her credit, she did not reply in the affirmative. Instead, she said, "I desperately want to." He conceded her point with a small nod. And because he wanted her to understand, he said, "That feeling that is building inside of you is normal. It's unsatiated desire, need." She had the gall to roll her eyes at him. "I know very well that women are not susceptible to the vices of the body in the same way that men are." Her words might have humored him had they not devastated him so completely. "I assure you, my lady, that pleasure is not a vice, and that women have just as great a right to it as men do." "Are you always so liberal when it comes to female physical autonomy?" she asked. "No." But James made himself a promise right then, and he repeated it to her to solidify it. "But I will be with you. When we are married, I will show you what it is to lose your body to another, to a single moment in time. I will drive you wild, and you will love it." "Show me now." The Earl of Heather's blue eyes, dark with his carnal promise, snapped to her face. "You want me to show you?" "Now?" he whispered clearly, stunned by her bold statement. "I think so," she returned. And because her nerves were stealing her very breath, she tried to lighten the tense atmosphere by teasing him. "That way, if I don't like what you do, I have time to convince my father to end our engagement." His voice was deep, so low that it made her shiver. "That rather sounds like a challenge, my lady." "Perhaps. I'm going to ask you one more time. Is this me what you want?" Diana barely had to think it through. She was too greedy for the promise he'd made her. "Yes, you are," He grinned, and it was wicked. His big hand moved over her waist. He trailed his fingers over the fabric of her dress, up her ribs and over her breast. Her nipples beneath her stays pinched painfully tight in response. Diana moaned at the faint touch. "Here," he asked, his hand hovering over her breast. "Yes," she begged. Instead of cupping her over the fabric of her dress as she'd expected, he slipped his hand into her dress and lifted her small breast from its confines. Diana gasped as his rough hand touched her sensitized skin, and she was exposed not only to the night, but to the Earl. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her rational mind told her that she should be ashamed or embarrassed to be so exposed. But when she looked up at her fiancé, any shame or embarrassment simply dissolved. He looked hungry, unhinged, undone. For her. And it made her feel glorious. "I'm making love with you," he replied, and bending his head, drew her nipple firmly into his hot, wet mouth. Diana's body shuddered with pleasure. She closed her eyes against the force of her response and arched into the pressure into his mouth. The Earl used his tongue and lips pulling and teasing the sensitive peak until her breaths were leaving her in panted pleas. When he pulled back, releasing her flesh with a distinctive pop, she begged, "Don't stop." Roughly, James replied, "Never," and lifting her other breast from its confines, lavished it with the same attention. "She is going to unman me, and she has not even touched me yet," James thought, as he sucked her pebbled nipple into his mouth. Diana's lithe body was taut in his hands. The sounds she made were wanton for one so innocent, and every time she begged him for more, he felt him give more of himself away to her. Her kindness and beauty may have drawn him in, but her responsiveness had hooked him, and the fact that she'd trusted him to show her what her body was capable of damned him. Lady Diana Hughes might not have known it, but she was a wildling at heart, and James was going to be the only man to ever stoke those fires within her. He could hear her breathing fast, but so heavy. He could feel the tremors coursing through her and wanting to help her find release. He slipped his hand beneath her dress and stroked his fingers up her inner thigh. When Diana froze, he took her lips in a deep kiss. He broke away, asking, "Do you trust me?" She nodded once, and it was sure, yes. James slid his hand through the slit in her drawers and gently cupped her. He expelled a shaky rush of air when he felt how hot, how wet she was. "It's not usually like that." Her voice was barely a whisper, but her confusion and embarrassment were clear. "I know, little dove. Your body knows what it needs to make it easier for me to fit inside of you." He ran his middle and index finger through the soft hair between her legs, gently furrowing deeper until he slid through slick flesh. Diana gripped his shirt and hid her face against his chest as he found the knot of nerves at the apex of her thighs and gently circled it. She unconsciously opened her legs wider, murmured, "James." "I know," he said gently and kissed the side of her head. "Close your eyes, Diana. Relax. Feel me." "Feel me!" Diana's mind screamed. If anything, she felt too much of him, felt too much for him. His fingers moved, shifting downwards to an entirely new place. Her body was out of her control, trembling and shaking in time to his every touch, like a kite caught in a tumbling wind. She could feel the crash looming. As if he sensed it too, James trailed kisses down her neck. He whispered, "When we are married, I'm going to use my mouth here." And he pressed down on that aching place again. Shifting lower, he pressed a single finger into her, adding, "And my cock here." The rough way he spoke was too much, too appealing. Diana was helpless but to let go. She arched against him. A long moan ripped from her. Her body clung to his finger as ripples of pleasure washed through her each wave, as earth-shattering as the last, if not as intense as the prior. He moved gently, thrusting into her in a way that steadied the pulsing waves and told her that he knew exactly what he was doing. Slowly her body calmed and her breathing returned to normal. She felt glorious, loose and sleepy and satiated. James gently fixed her dress and then kissed the side of her head. When she shifted, he only held her closer, held her tighter. "Don't be embarrassed," he said. "I couldn't stand it if you had regrets." "I don't," she replied firmly. Diana would have been embarrassed had she been so wanton with anyone else. But with James, she had only to look at his stunned expression to know that while he was far more experienced in the ways of the world than her, this was new to him too. Perhaps even overwhelming. And it was actually quite lovely to ponder that she would enter a union with a man whom she could tease and entice, a man who saw no shame in teaching his wife to take what she wanted, even if what she wanted took something from him. "I was actually wondering if you wanted to elope after all." James turned those blue eyes glinting with humor on her, and he replied, "I would. Unfortunately, I'm unavailable. I'm meeting my fiancé in the morning." "Drat," she said, playing along. "I suppose she's quite proper, even a little boring." James kissed her forehead gently. "Actually, she's quite perfect in all but one way." "Oh," he sighed deeply. "I'm told she snores," he said mock regretfully. And Diana laughed.